So a few weeks ago, I did something that I thought I would never do. I sold my Grand Seiko SPGA 427. This is the same Grand Seiko that I said was the perfect watch for me. This is also the same Grand Seiko that was the watch that I wore the most over the past year, and it worked flawlessly throughout this time. So why did I end up selling it and using the money to buy a Rolex? Well, my reasoning can be summed up by this little clip over here, and if you're still confused, that's okay. Let me explain a little bit. So let's start with a bit of background. I purchased the Grand Seiko SPGA 427 back in July 2021. In the months leading up to this purchase, I really wanted to own a Grand Seiko because I felt that their movements, the finishing, and overall value for money was top notch, and I felt like having one would be a great addition to my collection. Essentially, this was supposed to be the best watch in my collection. It was going to be the watch that I would wear with pride, and I would wear it for decades to come. And in many ways, the SPGA 427 checked all these boxes. It had the 9R65 movement with the displayed case back, it had a textured gray dial with the green accents, and it was only priced at $5,000 US, which is actually a little bit cheaper compared to other spring drive Grand Seikos, and it came with a strap and a bracelet as well. So let's go back to that clip again that I showed earlier. What does this clip show us? Well, this clip was meant to show what the dial looks like in different lighting conditions, more specifically in low, medium, and bright conditions. Now pay attention to the medium and bright conditions. You can clearly see the gray vertical lines, and you can also see how the seconds hand and power reserve indicator are a nice shade of green. And it looks pretty nice, right? But when you switch to the low lighting condition, the dial just kind of turns into a matte gray. The green hands don't pop out as much, and everything just kind of looks plain and boring, and well, everything just looks kind of gray. Now you might be thinking, of course it looks bad in poor lighting conditions. Any watch that's not in a well-lit environment is not going to look good. And while I can kind of agree with that reasoning, here's the problem with Grand Seiko. It doesn't really look that good in 90% of angles and lighting conditions. You might have heard from other watch YouTubers that Grand Seiko watches are hard to photograph, and the SPGA 427 is no exception. When I had to make the review for this watch, it took me so many tries just to get the right angle and the right lighting conditions to make the dial look beautiful, because otherwise it just looked like a plain gray. Now of course, part of this is due to limitations with my camera, but I can honestly say that with just the naked eye, you can see that this watch doesn't look good in most conditions. So over time, I kind of just got bored with looking at a plain gray watch. The only times I would see the beautiful textured vertical lines and green hands was either when I was outside in direct light, or I just happened to be looking at the watch at just the right angle. Now this isn't a problem with just Grand Seiko, it's more of a problem with textured dials in general. And just as an example, here's a side-by-shot comparison of the Seiko Lordmatic that I purchased a while ago. You can see that the dial really shines in mid-lighting conditions, but in low or bright lighting, it just doesn't look that great. So the dial looking kind of bland was definitely a contributing factor to selling my Grand Seiko, but there was actually another reason that I don't like to admit, and that second reason is brand recognition, or rather, the lack of it. Now of course, within the luxury watch community, everyone knows who Grand Seiko is. They know that this is a Japanese luxury watch brand, but to the rest of the world, a Grand Seiko is just another Seiko. And I have 3 stories to prove this. The first one being that when I decided to sell this Grand Seiko, I told my sister about it, and when I showed her the watch, she did say that she liked it, but she guessed that the watch was going to be sold between 500 to 600 Canadian dollars. She had no idea that this watch was retailing for 5,000 US dollars, and the reason is that when she looked at the brand, all she saw was Seiko. The second story I have is that several months ago, I contacted one of those vintage jewelry shops and I asked them if they were selling any Grand Seikos. The guy responded saying, "No, sorry, we don't. We only sell luxury watches here." Finally, for my last story, this one actually just happened a few days ago. I was telling my coworker about how I like Grand Seiko watches, and she responded that her dad likes watches too, but he likes luxury brands like Rolex and Omega. So I think it's pretty clear based on my experience that the general public doesn't really consider Grand Seiko to be a luxury brand. And I know that as a watch enthusiast, I really shouldn't care about what other people think. I should just care about what I think. But honestly, it's kind of disheartening to know that you have a watch with Zaratsu polishing and this innovative spring drive movement and it's handmade, handcrafted, but when everyone looks at it, they just think, oh, it's a nice $500 watch. This is where Rolex comes in and solves both issues. For starters, most of their watches don't have texture dials, and so as you can see with this 1992 Rolex Air King, the dial looks similar in all sorts of lighting conditions. So while you could say that the Grand Seiko dial is more interesting and complex, this Rolex dial is more consistent and arguably more timeless. And of course, Rolex is the most recognizable luxury watch brand in the world. It's the reason why so many celebrities and athletes buy the brand, and it's also why so many watch enthusiasts hate the brand. It's because it's so mainstream and popular now. But don't get me wrong, I don't just buy watches for the brand recognition, and a great example is my Citizen Chronomaster. The Citizen Chronomaster just has the word Citizen on it, so most people will think that it's just a typical watch for a few $100s, but I've kept this watch because of the unique dial, and it looks good at all lighting conditions. So what have we learned today so far? Well, first of all, I think that textured dials are kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, they can look really nice, but in other lighting conditions and angles, they kind of just look plain and dull. And then the second thing we've learned is that Grand Seiko is still pretty obscure to the general public. They don't really recognize it as a luxury watch brand as they do with Omega and Rolex. Now, this doesn't mean that I've given up on the brand. I still like Grand Seiko as a company and I still like their watches, but I think that the next Grand Seiko I purchase, I'm going to keep in mind that texture dials don't always look as good as they do in certain lighting conditions. So now you all know why I don't have my Grand Seiko watch anymore, but the video is not over yet. I'm now going to be unboxing that Rolex Air King that I purchased, and you'll maybe get a better sense of why I chose this watch to replace my Grand Seiko. The full review will be coming out in a few weeks or so, or maybe a month. I'm still working on my Mexico application, so that definitely takes priority. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and enjoy the unboxing. Alright, so finally we're getting to the unboxing. I did not expect that I'd be unboxing 2 Rolexes in 1 year, but here we are. This is the Rolex Air King 14,000. The box is pretty similar to the Rolex 5500 that I unboxed a few months ago. So let's go ahead and begin. So the first thing we see a few extra links here, which could be useful. These are screwed links. And then this is the Rolex guarantee. This is what a lot of collectors and buyers are looking for. They want to make sure that this is an authentic Rolex. So if I open it up here, I might blot this out because I think you want to keep that part private for some reason. But anyways, this is a guarantee that this is an authentic Rolex. You won't be able to see it, but this is a watch from Hong Kong. This is from El Dorado Watch Co. from Hong Kong, which is pretty interesting because I bought this from Japan. And then this thing here, I tried to use Google Translate. I think this is some sort of warranty, international warranty information. I don't know if all Rolexes have this this paper here, but I guess, yeah, that's nice to have as well. And then here we have service center information. So this Rolex is a 1992 Rolex Air King, and it was serviced February 25th, 1993, which is quite interesting. You can see that there was some timing, mainspring, and some technical charge maintenance. So yeah, this watch was serviced pretty recently, or pretty soon after it was purchased. So that's also nice to have. But really we're looking at the main box. That's what everyone wants to see. So the box itself is quite similar to the Rolex Air King 5500 from a few months ago. I'm gonna open it up here. It comes in a nice brown pouch-like material. But yeah, there it is. This is the Rolex Air King 14,000. So this is 1992. So it's 20 years newer than the Air King that I reviewed a few months ago. You can see the word precision. It's not chronometer rated. The Air King that comes after the 14,000 becomes chronometer rated, but this one unfortunately is just precision, but it has been pretty accurate. I think it's been about -5 seconds per day, and it hasn't been serviced in a really long time. Now I'm not going to touch the crown because there's some issues. It needs to be serviced. I'm not sure why my phone was having problems focusing, but here it is again with the Roman numerals, the white dial. Interestingly, if you look at the back here, the last owner did not peel off the back of the watch, or back of the sticker. So we're gonna do that today because, I don't know, I feel like the sticker feels pretty old and there's already scratches in the back case anyway, so I don't think it really matters. So this is a pretty rare treat because a lot of the times the sticker is peeled off, but this owner decided to keep it. So let's go ahead and peel it off. Oh boy. So that did not peel off the nicest, which makes sense because it's been on there for a long time. So that's the back sticker. That back sticker has been on this watch for probably 30 years now, so I'll probably clean that up a bit and then yeah, there you go. The Rolex Air King 14,000. You can see here this part actually, just a quick side note. This part that holds the bracelet on, it's usually quite bent over, decades of use, but this one is pretty tight to the case, so that's good news. But yeah, that is the Rolex Air King. I'm not going to do a full review yet. This is actually going to get sent to a watchmaker to get it serviced. The watch is ticking fine, but the crown is a little bit stiff, and I think it just needs to be lubricated. So yeah, that is it for the unboxing of the Rolex Air King 14,000.